That's a good point. So the point was made that we're preaching to the choir, and I can understand that. Are we preaching to the choir? Our point today, I'm glad you said that, ma'am, or whoever said that, because our point isn't just that we want you to be against abortion in your attitude, like to agree with us. We know, in fact, that's why we're here. We come to a good person's house for help, not an evil person's. But it's not just enough for us to be against it in our minds, to have an opinion about it. There has to be a moral action. We can be pro-life in opinion. We can say, yes, abortion's a bad thing. But if there's no action, what good is it? If there was a hungry child left on your doorstep, and you said, well, I'm against starvation, but you did nothing to feed that child, that would obviously be wrong. And God's not going to ask us on Judgment Day how we felt about feeding the hungry. He's going to ask you what you did. And He's not going to ask us how we felt about the murder of children in the womb. He's going to ask you what you did. So when we say that someone might think we're preaching to the choir, it can't be that we're carrying out the moral action that is required of us if this evil is perfectly legal without restriction for 41 years. It should have never become legal to begin with, but here it is. It's on our watch, and this time and this day and place. Here we are, and we got to ask, what are we going to do? And it's not enough to just have an attitude against it. We have to take action. Our faith without works is dead. In James it says that pure and undefiled religion is to minister to widows and orphans in their need. We see throughout the Old Testament that we are to do justice, love mercy, care for the fatherless, the oppressed. And it's not just to be against it, oppression in your attitude, it's to actually do something. So some people might be asking, well, what can I do? This is such a big giant, it's such an evil, how can we oppose it? It just starts with each of you getting your heart right before God about it. And God will use you. That if we are apathetic, we have to repent of that. I mean, we want to do all we can to preach the gospel, to care for all people in need, and especially our unborn neighbor. And it starts by all of us going back to our churches and sharing this with our fellowship and challenging our pastors, saying, what are we doing about this? Do we want to be a church that goes down in history like the churches in Germany that we condemn today and say, how could they have stood by and allowed their Jewish brothers and sisters to be slaughtered? Or how could we have stood by and watched the black man and woman, the black families torn apart and sold like cattle? That happened in this very nation, and it happened the same way that abortion happens today. That abortion, it's ingrained in the culture, and people think there's no way you'll ever outlaw it, or there's always going to be abortion, so why fight it anyway? That's what they said about slavery. They said you'll never outlaw it, and what's the black person going to do if they're free anyway? I mean, all of these arguments parallel what we hear about abortion. But the fact remains that just like the black person was a human being and is a human being made in the image of God and valuable, that Christ died for them and loves them just as much as He loves you, the same is true for the unborn child. And so are we going to be Christians that our grandkids look back and say, why did grandma and why did grandpa do nothing about this evil? Or are they going to say, my grandma opposed that evil, my grandpa opposed that evil? But more importantly, what is God going to say?